Right, let's see, are we recording right now? Are we live? Looks like it. I've been using Nikon Z6II for over a year now, and here are my thoughts. Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today I want to actually take some time and go through all of the questions that I received throughout the year since I've been using Nikon Z6II. And I'm kind of actually made a list here for myself just to make it easier, make sure I don't miss anything. If you are familiar with my channel, you have seen that throughout the year I released a number of videos on Nikon Z6II, how to use it, its ergonomics, image quality, but it's kind of in bits and pieces. Today, I'm going to talk about just overall concept and the experience that I have with using this camera for a year. So guys, in the past year, I shot a number of images with this camera, with Z6II. You know, everything from portraits to individual and group work to, I've taken this camera on family vacations. I've done a wedding with this one. I've shot some seascapes and landscapes. I've done even some video work, and including 120 frames per second. And if you haven't seen my video yet, I'm gonna leave a card here up in a corner above, just if you guys want to check it out to see what the video at 120 frames per second looks like with this camera. So having said that, let me start with some of the probably basic specifications of the camera. Many of you might be familiar with it, but just for the entire, kind of take the whole picture into one perspective, let's look at all of the details. So as far as the image quality, I would say the image quality in most of these mirrorless cameras these days are absolutely fantastic. Now, specifically with Nikon Z6II, you're looking at 24.5 megapixels, full frame, BSI, CMOS sensor. The colors on this camera are fantastic, just on Nikon in general. You have a dual X-Speed 6 processor, image processor. When it comes to the frame rates, it shoots at 14 frames per second. And here's kind of a quick demonstration of that. So it's relatively fast, especially if you're using an XQD card for this. So color renditions of these images, probably Nikon is known for one of the most natural color renditions in camera, including basically, with the JPEGs. What camera utilizes what known as a we see weeg. What you see is what you get, and this is component pretty much for with any mirrorless camera. Basically, what you see in the back of a screen up here is what the exposure is going to look like. So it's definitely much easier than using any of the DSLRs that many of us use in the past. This is a D500. I love this camera. D850. And any previous DSLR cameras, you'll see that you kind of have to really learn the exposure triangle. But with mirrorless cameras, it's much different. That today you don't have to do that as much because what you see on the screen is what you're going to get in the camera. Now, JPEGs. JPEGs are amazing to a point where, we've gone on vacation. I wasn't trying to shoot much in RAW. I primarily focused on JPEGs, because it's a family vacation. I'm not doing, heavy paid work. And, we went to Niagara Falls, beautiful images, beautiful colors out there. We've gone on other family vacations to Cape Cod. Again, I just primarily shot in JPEGs, and the images are so easy to work with. Images are so easy to work with that I really absolutely loved it. Now the camera has two card slots. One of them is the XQD, and the other one XQD CF Express card right here. This is my previous one that I use for the XQD 64 gigabyte card, and the other one obviously is the SD cards. Now I've heard some debate whether why did Nikon do this. There's, I think, two benefits. If you're switching from DSLR going over to mirrorless, and you have a bunch of SD cards, it only makes sense to be able to transition, not to invest more into the system. Now, if you're looking more for video and you're looking for a lot higher frame rates, Nikon gives you this option as well to acquire XQD or CF Express cards, because the speed with those cards is so much faster, not only when you're writing to a camera, but also when you copying images, files from the camera right onto your computer. It goes extremely fast. You know, you can transfer 20 gigabytes worth of data probably in a matter of a minute rather than half an hour. So if speed is important to you, XQD, CF Express cards, it's absolutely a future. As you can see, Canon R5, Nikon Z9 just was released. All of them are using CF Express cards. As you can see, this is what the future is going. Now, nice other thing is to be able to charge camera via the USB port. So here's the USB port on the side here. And the nice thing about it, you know, you may only want to have 1 or 2 batteries, and you know, you can either bring a charger with you, or you can bring something like I have, a power bank. You know, power bank is very easy to use. It quickly connects. It's small. You can just put it in your camera bag, and it works great. So be able to connect right in camera. It takes a little bit longer to charge the battery, but nonetheless, you have an option to do that. Okay, next one is, now this is probably not a big deal for most people, but be able to have on and off switch right at the fingertips. I don't have to use my second hand, and I know, like, for example, like an R5, Canon R5 and Canon R6, they have their power switch on and off on the left hand side, so you constantly have to utilize that. And I really appreciate this because I got really used to having this function, having it on right at my when my index finger is, because when we were on vacation, we walked for probably about a mile, and there are points where, you know, I want to stop and take some pictures, and I just was carrying my camera like this, right, with just a hand strap, and it was very easy for me just to do this, because I was walking my kids with my other hand, you know, helping them out. And again, not a big deal, but if it's important to you, you know, I really love this function. You know, the same thing actually with, you know, D850 and D500. It was the same option here, right? Having to do this only with your right one hand. Okay, next one is touchscreen. Touchscreen is very sharp on the camera itself. You know, you're looking at, it's not fully articulated like you would find with a, you know, Canon R5 and R6. You know, I keep referring back to those cameras because I think this is sort of probably one of the biggest competitors, along with some of the Sony cameras. But it uses a 3.2 inch screen, 2.1 million dot tilting touch screen. So if you are primarily using it for photos, okay, if you're using it only for photos, it's probably going to be much easier for you, because you don't have to take your screen off to the side like you would have to do with fully articulated screen if you want to be able to tilt it like this. Now, if you're using it for video as well, but you're primarily behind the camera, again, from what I'm hearing from other people who are primarily video creators, this is the option they also prefer. Now, if you're a vlogger, you definitely want to have fully articulated screen, basically, to turn around so you can see. One of the things that I noticed that this camera, Z6II, it doesn't go fully down the way my D500 would have done. Okay, this one goes way lower, right? You can see the difference basically. And again, it may not be a big deal for you, but I really liked when I was trying to take a very high shots to do something like this. Now, something else that the camera offers is this called I button. Basically, it's your quick menu where you can quickly access all of the function buttons that you need, whether you're using a photo or you're using a video. It's a touch screen. It's very quickly to switch from one function to another. And when you switch from photo to video, the camera keeps previous settings. In other words, it's not going to carry over the settings unless you set it that way for you from photo to video. Now, if you a hybrid shooter, for example, I know some people shoot weddings and they do photo and video at the same time. This is a great function because, again, you can simply switch from photo to video in the matter of using your thumb. Again, great function. Functionality-wise and where the buttons are placed. Nikon really thought through this component, and again, kudos to Nikon for doing that. FTZ adapter. Now, this was the big one. When I was switching camera systems, I didn't know exactly, how I'm gonna do, right? Because it is a much expensive investment. Even though we're going mirrorless, it's still gonna cost you a lot more in batteries and CF Express cards. And I'm very happy the way Nikon developed this FTZ adapter from F mount to Z mount. And one thing I gotta say, if you're using primarily for photography, you don't have to go out and buy Z mount lenses, because it's almost the camera itself made F mount lenses so much more sharper and more accurate to shoot. You don't have to calibrate like we've done before with the DSLRs, all of our lenses, because it really, once it pinpoints on something to shoot, it exactly as is. For video, even for video, is not a big deal to be able to switch or keep F-mount lenses, because one difference I only noticed is that because of the motor in these F-mount lenses, what you find is that little focusing noise as the camera starts to focus. Now, with Z-mount lenses, like this one, for example, 50mm f1.8, because it uses a different motor and different mechanism how it focuses, it's absolutely quiet. So when it comes to video work, Z-mount lenses, I think, is way to go. But if you're doing video work, once in a while, the F-mount lenses just as fantastic. In fact, I have used my lovely Sigma 18 to 55, 18 to 35 f1.8 lens, Sigma art lens, and on FTZ adapter with my Z6 camera, and it really works lovely. It absolutely is. And in fact, I don't have to switch now and kind of buy a wide angle lens, because I can continue to utilize the same lens I've been using before. Now, as far as the video capabilities, the camera shoots 4K, 24, 30, 60 frames per second. Actually, just recently did a firmware update, and it does HD in 120 frames per second. Now, it also does in a slow-mo, and I recently done a video. I'm going to also link it up in a description above here in the card if you guys want to check it out to see what it looks like. Again, that video was recorded with a 50mm lens and Z6II camera. So, you be the judge. Do you need to necessarily go and switch to Canon or Sony, or the video capabilities are pretty much becoming just as great in Nikon mirrorless just as it is in Canon and Nikon cameras. Now let's see, as far as the video recording, I primarily use this camera for video in a neutral profile, because I found that it is much easier to grade the footage than using a standard profile. I also heard that some people utilizing flat profile, they found it maybe it's a little bit easier. I primarily shoot indoors, so maybe I don't need as much of a dynamic range as somebody who would be shooting outdoors. But in my personal experience, utilizing neutral profile in this camera has been very good to me. Now, the camera records, it's 8-bit, it's not a 10-bit, unless you're using an external recorder like Ninja V. But again, for indoor videos, and if you have a proper lighting, the camera does a fantastic job. As far as the ISO, how good is it? Is it better than D850, D500? I would say that it is just as good in this camera as it was in the DSLRs. I've shot wedding, with ISO probably close to 3200 and 4000 delivering images, and you barely can tell the difference when it comes to grain. You really have to zoom in, and utilizing this camera in ISO, just images are lovely. I really have no complaints. It really has gone from DSLRs to mirrorless, and it's like leaps and bounds. So ISO range is absolutely fantastic. It goes from 100 to 51,200. Obviously, I'm never going to shoot probably paid gigs with such a high ISO, but nonetheless, if you're using it for family and some quick events maybe that you're not maybe getting paid for it, you can go up to 25,000 ISO and still have keepers, especially if you're just posting it on Instagram, on your social media accounts. That works absolutely fine. Z-mount lenses. So far, I have personally utilized, again, I'm not going to speak for any other Z-mount lenses that I have not used, but I used 50mm Z-mount lens f1.8, and for the money, this lens is fantastic. I know that f-mount lenses, they used to be probably closer at maybe $200 for f-mount lens f1.8 50mm. Now these are significantly more expensive, but I would also say the quality of these lenses is a lot better. I've done an exclusive video on this specific lens probably about 6 months ago. Pretty much everything about this lens that I can share, that I'm aware of, and feel free to check out that video as well if you want to know more in details about this lens. Now, I am debating whether to purchase 24-70 f2.8 or 70-200. Would love some help from you guys. Please comment in the description box below, because I primarily shoot portraits and weddings. I don't do as much of landscape work, although sometimes I do find it's helpful to have a wider angle lens. But if you guys have experience with any of those lenses, Z-mount lenses, 24-70 f2.8 or 70-200, please let me know. I would love to hear your opinion, what your personal experience with those lenses is, and how you use that maybe on Nikon Z6II, and will be much appreciated. One of the big switches for me using Nikon mirrorless camera was EVF. Okay, it's an electronic viewfinder. Pretty much what you see here is also what you're going to see on your screen. Now, using optical viewfinder, it was great because you don't have any blackouts with optical viewfinder. You do have a blackout with the Nikon Z6II. I know that issue has been addressed significantly with newly released Nikon Z9, which is a beast of a camera. But again, it doesn't bother me because I am either working in studio or I'm working outside with portraits, and I don't need necessarily, that kind of a fast refresh rate or not having a blackout. I've done sports a little bit with this one, not a whole lot. I'm going to put some images here right now in front of you, so that you have an understanding what it looks like when it comes to using sports. Obviously, you're just going to have to use a fast shutter speed. But I would say, EVF, it really, it's during the day if you want to review some images. I remember when I shot a wedding and I was outdoors and I wasn't sure what the exposure looked like, because when you look in the back of a screen and you have a sunlight, it's really hard to see the quality of the images. But using the EVF inside, it makes perfect sense that, again, this is the way the technology is going with EVFs. Next one is eye and face autofocus. I know that's a big concern for, that's almost kind of becomes the competition in itself between Canon and Nikon and Canon, Nikon, and Sony right now. But I would say it has a 273-point face detect AF system, and it covers primarily 90% of area image. When it comes to different focusing points, focusing options, it has a single point AF, it has a dynamic area AF, wide area AF, as well as auto area AF for people and animals. And I really love the fact that you can get to see that yellow box on a person's eyes whenever you do portraits. And the same thing with animals, cats and dogs, and that's now AF has significantly improved with Nikon Z9, and I keep referring like a broken record to that new camera right now, but I'm hoping that some of the technology will trickle down now to maybe not so much Z6II and Z7II, but maybe it will be Z8 perhaps, I don't know. But again, some of this technology is going to be trickling down to the lower caliber Nikon cameras. Camera IBIS, in-body image stabilization. Now, I shot probably a fifth of a second, and images were fantastic. I would never been able to do this hand holding with my DSLR to do such a sharp images. I'm going to put a couple images right now in front of you that you get to see that was shot probably at a fifth of a second or maybe a tenth of a second. And again, images were absolutely fantastic doing that. In addition, camera has 5-axis sensor shift, so that kind of helps you with your stabilizing the image. Next one is I want to mention is auto white balance. The auto white balance in a camera is, I believe, also improved drastically because it has 3 types of auto white balance: A0, A1, and A2. A0 basically it keeps whites, reduces warm colors within the image. The second one is A1. It keeps overall atmosphere of the image. It kind of like, what you see primarily is what you want to get in camera. And the third one is A2, where you keep warm lighting colors. Okay, so it's definitely nice for autumn photography, for landscaping. You want to utilize, you might want to utilize that option, if you necessarily don't want to switch to other white balance modes. One other thing that I like about the mirrorless Z6II is the over-the-air updates when it comes to firmware. I no longer have to utilize my SD card or XQD card, put it in the computer, and then put it back in the camera and run the updates. But I can do all of that with Nikon SnapBridge, wireless connectivity, to be able to update the firmware, and it's just a nice thing to have. Now, next one, I'm going to talk about things that I don't like about the camera. It is not a perfect camera. I don't hate necessarily those things. I just feel like some of those things can be improved a little bit. Now, ergonomics. Ergonomics for me personally is a big thing because when you're holding a camera for an extended period of time, you want to make sure it's properly molded to your hand. Now with this one, I have been utilizing my Spider hand strap, and it's been very helpful because it kind of reduces some of that ability to hold the camera and constantly squeezing it, because if it's a smaller body. Now, it was a different experience for me. Now, the camera is certainly heavier, Nikon D500, or if you're using D850, but it perfectly molds within my hand. As you can see, I don't have very huge hands, but I do need space for my pinky. And this, the body size of this camera was absolutely perfect for my hand. I almost wish that Z6II had a little bit larger camera body. Now, you can certainly get a battery grip for this one, but if you're not into spending another $400 for a battery grip, unless you really need it and you want to improve your battery life, some people would argue with me probably, if you're going on vacation, it's definitely nicer to have a smaller camera body, and I don't disagree with that. Be able to put it in your camera bag, having a smaller form factor is definitely a help. But for what I personally use, I really wish that ergonomics was a little bit larger. I know you can put a little L plate to this one, but it's almost hard to find those L plates anywhere else. So, but ergonomically, when it comes to button functionality, I think it's excellent. But when it comes to holding it, I wish it was slightly larger. Now, battery life. Battery life is not ideal. I would definitely say that the DSLR cameras have much better battery life. I can shoot the entire wedding with D500 and just only use one battery. When I shot wedding with Z6II, I used, I want to say, at least 2.5 batteries, and especially if you're doing a video, it's because you have constantly EVF running and you have a back screen trying to autofocus, whatever. Even if you're kind of moving the camera back and forth this way, it's constantly focuses. So what I frequently would do, I would basically turn my camera on and off. If I'm not using it for probably 10 minutes, I'm just going to turn it off, because it's so easy to do. One thing I wasn't really thrilled about is that I wasn't able to adapt my Pocket Wizard triggers. I was really hoping to do so, but I found out that it's not so much problem with the camera itself. It does have a new firmware, but the Pocket Wizard themselves could not update it. I use Pocket Wizards extensively in my studio with my strobes, as well as outdoors with flashes, and they were just very reliable. Pocket Wizards were so reliable and so good to me. Now, because I do some flash photography, I had to switch to my Godox system now. I haven't used it a whole lot, but times when I've used it, it works absolutely perfectly. I also got the AD200 Pro. Great flash, very powerful, but it's, that's one thing that I wish Nikon or maybe Pocket Wizards worked a little bit more. Now, what I also don't like is the D-pad in the back. It feels a little bit soft. It's not as a professional grade D-pad, I would say, as always on the D500. It really feels more like a plasticky, and there's a more tactile feedback with this one. I really like the D-pad on the D500, and I'm hoping that with the newer versions of maybe Z6II in the future, they will improve the D-pad for the camera. One other thing is that sensor is not protected. I do like about Canon R5 and R6 is when you remove your lens, your sensor is kind of exposed. And if you are shooting it somewhere, in the beach, at the beach area, if you are photographing somewhere where there's a lot of sand and wind and you're frequently changing lenses, you can definitely will need your sensor to be cleaned more often. With R5 and R6 and actually with Z9 right now they released, you have that sensor shield that allows you to protect your sensor. So having said that, that's one of the things that obviously that can be updated with the firmware, but it's more of a camera, mechanical feature that needs to be updated with the next model. And the camera also records with 29 minutes and 59 seconds. I wish that they would let this go and make that update with the firmware, but I don't know, because I haven't seen one camera manufacturer yet who initially released the camera with time limit and then been able to change that and kind of make it unlimited. So I don't necessarily think it's going to happen with a Z6II or Z7II. But nonetheless, again, if Nikon is watching it, if you guys listening, please make that change with future cameras. For us creators who do a video like this at home, it's a big help. I want to also mention things that you might be important to you. It's not so much important to me, but these are a couple of things. One of them is for video, there's no internal analog 10-bit. You can achieve that if you're utilizing something like Atomos Ninja 5. However, if it's important to you, you can get Atomos Ninja 5, you maybe already have that. For me, it's not as important because I'm primarily recording in 8-bit. In fact, I like the colors when it records in 8-bit. If you want to go back to look at some of my videos, most of my videos that I have created in the past year have been recorded with Nikon Z6II. And one other thing is to mention is that what I really love about this camera is that before I used to deliver a certain number of images to my clients, whether it's a wedding, whether it's a portrait shoot, whether it's a shoot with my client, and not every image was as sharp. In other words, if one thing that I do personally, if my images are not sharp on the eye, it's not a portrait for me unless I'm going for a certain look. With this camera, because I can get a constant feedback whether my camera is focusing on the eye of a person, I'm delivering almost twice as many images as I used to in the past. So that's a huge one for me because I'm able to bring more value to my clients than I used to before. So I would say that this camera absolutely worth for photo and video capabilities what it delivers. So guys, I hope you found this video helpful to you. If you have any more questions about this camera, please put them down in the description box below. And if you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up. I'm told that supposedly it helps the algorithm of the video and helps the channel so that I can bring more content like this to viewers like you. Thank you.